News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. President Trump says Israel and Lebanon have agreed to a 10-day ceasefire. Details now from Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall.
President Trump says that he has invited the leaders of those two countries to the White House and that Secretary of State Marco Rubio, along with Vice President J.D. Vance, who is now leading the U.S.-Iran negotiations, will take a role in helping to ensure that Israel and Lebanon can have a longer-term agreement.
The president posted on social media that the 10-day ceasefire will begin at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Some Gulf Arab and European leaders believe it'll take about 6 months to come to a U.S.-Iran peace deal and that the warring sides should extend their ceasefire to cover that time frame. The news had stocks extending their gains to record highs. We check the markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 up 0.1%, NASDAQ up 0.3%. The Dow little changed on the upside. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.3%. The 2-year yield at 3.77%. IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol says it will take about 2 years to get oil production back to normal, longer for liquid natural gas, creating a problem for the Middle East.
I think this is a major economic and reputational challenge for many Gulf states, for all of them. But some of them are hurt more than the others. For example, I cannot put Saudi Arabia and Iraq in the same basket.
IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol speaking with Bloomberg Television. He adds that Europe has maybe 6 weeks or so of jet fuel left, saying that the energy crisis may lead to flight cancellations and higher fuel and electricity prices, adding that no country will be immune. WTI has now topped $94 per barrel, and Brent crude is approaching $100 per barrel. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, says 13 vessels have turned around rather than try to test a U.S. naval blockade aimed at preventing ships from going to or from Iranian ports.
We're now 24 hours plus into the blockade. You can see the turning around of multiple ships, 12 of which stayed inside the blockade line, one of which not depicted off to the eastern side, turned around before even attempting it.
General Kane says more than 10,000 sailors, Marines, and airmen, along with more than a dozen ships and dozens of aircraft, are executing that mission. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned the U.S. knows which assets Iran has left and urged them to accept a deal to end the war.
Our forces are maximally postured to restart combat operations should this new Iranian regime choose poorly and not agree to a deal.
Hegseth says if Iran does not agree, the U.S. will start dropping bombs, quote, on infrastructure, power, and energy. You can hear the entire briefing with Hegseth and General Kane on the Bloomberg YouTube page. Weekly jobless claims remain at historical lows. Just 207,000 first-time applications were filed last week. That's lower than the 213,000 that economists surveyed by Bloomberg expected. Bloomberg's Enda Curran with more.
The backdrop was the official data for the month of March that we had very strong job gains, broad-based, unemployment rate falling. So I don't think these numbers this morning would necessarily lean into a near-term dovish case for the Fed.
Bloomberg's Enda Curran in Washington. New York Fed President John Williams says monetary policy remains well positioned to deal with the threat of a protracted supply shock caused by the war. He still sees the economy growing at 2 to 2.5% this year. Williams spoke at an event in New York City. Fed Governor Stephen Myron says he still thinks the central bank should lower its benchmark policy rate several times this year. Myron told an event in Washington that the Fed should cut rates perhaps 3 or 4 times this year. The next Fed meeting is set for April 28th and 29th. The earnings focus turns to entertainment when Netflix reports after the closing bell. The streaming giant is guiding for almost 14% revenue growth this year after raising subscriber fees earlier this year. Bloomberg Intelligence senior media analyst Geetha Raghunathan says she doesn't think that'll lead customers to jump ship.
If you actually look at, their prices versus some of their rivals, they've actually increased prices only by about 29% over the past 4 years. You look at a Disney Plus or an HBO Max, those prices have gone up by about 70 to 80%. So they're still pretty competitive when it comes to, the whole playing field there.
Geetha Raghunathan with Bloomberg Intelligence. Netflix shares have jumped 27% since abandoning its bid for Warner Brothers Discovery back in February. Netflix shares today are little changed. Stellantis has inked an AI deal with Microsoft. The company's teaming up to accelerate deployment of AI software across its cars and operations. Both companies will co-develop more than 100 AI tools for areas such as customer support and predictive maintenance. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.